Hey guys, Pete here. Just got done rewatching Westworld Season 1, Episode 4, and this will be my scene-by-scene breakdown. I'm going to do Episode 4 like I did Episode 3, so after I finish this, I will do a separate summary video that I'll release later. I'll put a link up in the description and a card here that you can click on. Now, keep in mind this will contain spoilers for everything that's happened in Westworld up to this point, so if you haven't seen through Episode 4 yet, you'll want to stop watching. Now, let's jump into the episode. We find Dolores and Bernard in the programming center. We assume this is right after we saw her collapse in William's arms at the end of the last episode. Bernard is asking her questions alone, and when he asks if she remembers what happened before this, she says that someone hurt her family, that they killed them, and that she ran. Bernard has her limit her emotional effect, and when she says that it hurts to lose everyone she cared about, he says he can make that feeling go away. She asks why would she want that, and then says the pain and loss was all she had left of them. This was the same thing that Bernard said to his wife when she asked if sometimes he wished he could forget about their son's death. They go back and forth while she tries to explain the changes she's experiencing. Dolores asks if there is something wrong with her or if Bernard can help. When he asks her what she wants, she can only answer that she doesn't know. She goes on to say that she thinks there is something wrong with this world or that maybe she's losing her mind. Bernard then says he wants her to try a game. It's a secret that's called the maze. He tells her that if she can find the center of it, maybe she can be free. She says, "I think I want to be free." We then see her wake up in William's camp with a gun in her hand. He gives her a cup of coffee and we cut back to the Mariposa. Maeve asks Clementine if she ever has a feeling that she has something on the tip of her tongue but just can't remember it. They continue making small talk when then Maeve starts to glitch out. She starts remembering a guest walking through and shooting all the hosts and see him walk over to her and shoot. She then sees the text drag Clementine away and has a partial memory of being repaired. We hear one of the texts say that they need to get her back on the floor, and the other says he's not done yet, that there's still a bullet fragment inside of her, but the other text says just go ahead and patch her up. She then comes to and we see that they're back into that same conversation they were having earlier. She leaves the Mariposa and goes to her room. On the way, she's very skittish and looks disoriented. When she gets there, she looks in the mirror and then grabs a piece of paper to start sketching. When she's looking at the mirror, she's sort of looking at where she was shot. She draws a picture of the text she's seen in her memories and pulls up a floorboard to hide it. When she looks under the floor, she finds a pile of similar drawings that it doesn't look like she remembers. Back at the center, Elsie is talking with Teresa and Stubbs. We see the stray with his smashed in head sitting in the chair, and Teresa is asking if they figured out what happened to make him go off his loop. Bernard comes in, and when Elsie says that they're working to figure out what went wrong, Teresa tells them that her team will take over. She says Q&A will handle all cases of this nature from now on, and asks Bernard if he has any objections. He lets her take the stray and then leaves with Elsie following behind. Elsie's upset because she feels like something beyond a glitch is going on and that Bernard doesn't want her to tell anyone. She says it's like everyone has an agenda except for her, and then he tells her that she's imagining things. In much the same way Ford told him not to see things that weren't there, he tells her that the hosts don't imagine things, you do. He then tells her that the pattern on the shell is not Orion because Orion has 3 stars on its belt, not 4. Back at the camp, William gives Dolores his jacket because she looks like she's cold. He goes over to tell Logan that they should take her back to Sweetwater, but the bounty hunter host says they need to get moving or Slim's gonna get away. Logan says no way, and William eventually stops arguing with him about it. We find out that Logan has ulterior motives related to business and that he thinks the park sent Dolores on purpose. He says that the company should up their stake in Westworld because they can even give William a purpose. William says he thought the trip was about welcoming him into the family, and Logan responds by saying that with his family, everything is about business. The man in black still has Lawrence with his noose, and he's found what he thinks should be the blood arroyo. He says he can't find any snakes of the egg-laying variety, and Lawrence asks him what he hopes to find. The man in black says that this whole world is a story, and he's read every page except the last one. He wants to find out how it ends. As Lawrence is trying to talk him into leaving, he sees Armistice bathing in the river. He notices her giant snake tattoo and says he thinks they found their snake. Her men come up behind him and pull their guns. When she walks up, he says how he's never met her and it's a terrible oversight on his part, and asks her where she's going. She says she's going after something of great value, and he asks to join her party. He kills 2 of her men and then says it looks like you could use a couple more guys. A tech comes up to Stubbs to tell him that the rancher's daughter is taking a pretty big deviation from her loot. He asks the tech if she's with a guest, and the tech says she can't tell because the boss has disrupted so many things with his new story. He tells her to have behavior flag her and have them check her out later in the day. Dolores is at the small Mexican town where Lawrence is from. She looks at the well and then sees Lawrence's daughter sitting by herself. She approaches her and asks if it's her home. When the young girl says no, Dolores asks her where she's from. The girl says, "Same as you, don't you remember?" When she hears the word remember, Dolores hears Ford's voice and has a flashback. She sees the white church with the steeple that Ford was looking at in the empty part of the park, the same place he took Bernard to later. She sees the young girl in a church dress. The girl hits the sticks she's scratching the dirt with on the ground, and Dolores sees the doors of the church. Dolores looks at the ground and she sees the pattern of the maze scratched in the dirt. The girl disappears and a random man approaches her. He tells her that they've heard a girl went missing from Abernathy Ranch. She asks if that's where she's supposed to be and tells her that her father must be worried. She stops when he says this and then has a flash where she sees herself walking up to the church doors. She sees a gun in her hand, then she sees herself on the ground in front of a grave. She tells the man that her father's dead and that she's not going back. He grabs a hold of her arm and then William comes out asking what's going on. The man says he's just helping a lost traveler, to which William responds, "She's not lost, she's with me," and then the man goes away. William tells Dolores that they have a lead on the bounty and says she can just wait there for them to get back. She says, "No, I think I need to keep going," and they walk off together. We see the man in black with Lawrence and Armistice men on a ridge in the canyon. Lawrence says they're supposed to wait for a signal from Armistice if the information she has is good. We see her ride up to 2 cowboys on horses. After saying something to them, she kills them both, and the man in black says that must have been the signal. William and his companions are making camp again. Dolores says she's sorry if she made trouble between him and his friend. William says it's fine and asks her where she's headed. She says she doesn't know, and he says that he thought they kept them in zones or paths. Dolores says she used to believe everyone had a path and tells them a story about driving the cattle back home in the fall. How they would lose one every once in a while, and she had worried it wouldn't be able to find its way back. She says it never occurred to her that they were bringing them back for the slaughter. William asks how she's going to find her way now, and she says sometimes she feels like something is calling her, telling her there's a place for her beyond all of this. When she looks at the moon, she has another flashback, this time from outside the ranch. She sees the techs coming to collect the host's bodies, and then she starts to faint. William catches her and tells her they should get back to the fire because she's probably exhausted. 2 other guests approach the man in black at the bandits' campfire. The one tries to tell him he's a big admirer. He starts to say something like his foundation literally saved my sisters, and the man in black says, "One more word and I'll cut your throat. This is my vacation." Lawrence tells the man in black that apparently what Armistice and her men are looking for is at the prison. He says they plan on stealing a cannon from the cavalry, and the man in black says he doesn't have time for all that. He approaches Armistice and tells her that he'll ride at dawn to get her what she needs from the prison. All he wants in return are a few words. He then asks her if she's ever heard of a man named Arnold, who he says could be considered the original settler of these parts. He created a world where you could do anything you want except one thing. You can't die, which means no matter how real this world seems, it's just a game. Then Arnold broke his own rule. He died right there in the park. He says he believes he still had one story left to tell, and then pulls out the scalp with the maze on it from his jacket. As he shows it to her, he says a real story with real stakes, real violence. You could say I'm here to honor his legacy, and I think your tattoo is the next piece of the puzzle. She agrees to his offer, and he says he only needs one match in Lawrence. We next see him with Lawrence handcuffed in an armored stagecoach headed towards the prison. He pulls out some cigars, and the deputy tells him he can't smoke in there. He tells a story about how it's the finest tobacco rolled on the ample thighs of exotic women. He asks if he would like to try one himself, and the deputy takes the 2 remaining cigars and the case. He then gives a speech about choices to Lawrence, who he says has always been a prisoner. He says, "What if I told you I'm here to set you free?" When they get to the prison, the warden recognizes Lawrence and says he heard that he had escaped the hangman's noose. The man in black says maybe he prefers a firing squad, and the warden says he's sure they'll be able to oblige him. He then has the deputy take the man in black inside and put him in a cell with Hector. As the warden and his men walk Lawrence to be executed, the man in black and Hector have a conversation. The man in black pulls out the match he got from Armistice and then goes over to light the cigar. We see at this point the attack at the center say that they have a request for a pyrotechnic effect. Stubb approves it, and we see Lawrence tied to the post in front of the firing squad. The man in black puts the lit cigar in the lock of the jail cell where it explodes so they can get out. As the deputy comes out to stop them, the cigar in his mouth explodes, allowing those two to walk out of the prison without any trouble. They go outside, kill the warden and his men, and free Lawrence. They get Hector back to Armistice, who tries to offer to pay them back. The man in black says he just needs a word or two with her, and then she tells him the story of the tattoo. She explains that she was 7 when they rode into town, men in masks. They killed everyone there and killed her mother by cutting her from the jaw to her sex. She says she used her mother's blood to paint her skin to make it look like she was dead. She says she hunted down all the men and used their blood to paint her skin again. The man in black says only one man left for the head, which it's the only part that isn't filled in yet of the tattoo. He asks her what the last man's name is, and she tells him that it's Wyatt. Back in Sweetwater, there's a group of Indian families being run out of town. The townspeople are watching while Maeve notices a young girl drop a doll that looks like the techs in the hazmat suits. She runs after the girl to give it back, and when she asks what it is, the girl doesn't say anything at all. A nearby soldier tells her that she's wasting her breath because it's a part of their so-called religion, and none of them are going to tell her anything about that. Inside the Mariposa, Clementine is talking to the guest that was riding with Armistice and one of her men. When she comes over, Maeve says she recognizes him from Hector's gang. Clementine asks if she means the one who lives out with the savages, which makes Maeve think back to the little girl's doll. She tells Clementine yes, and looks like she has a plan that involves talking to Hector. Teresa's at Bernard's place, where they have a similar conversation to the last one we saw them have there about her staying for a while. In the conversation, she tells him that she's meeting with Ford the next day. When he asks why, she says that he's creating chaos in the park and that the board will be descending at any moment. He gives her advice to not show him that she's nervous or defensive. We see her find Ford, who's working on a large-scale renovation. She tells him that his new narrative looks to be on a massive scale and that she can have the board give him more time. He says he's sure they'd like to postpone it indefinitely, and then tells her to come with him. They walk off, and we see hosts working on the project everywhere as they go. They end up in a restaurant overlooking an agave plantation, and he says that she thinks he's gone mad, or maybe lost his way. She says they're merely concerned with the extent of the changes he's making, and that they want to protect his legacy. He sort of laughs at that and says, "You don't like it here, do you?" She tells him that she admires the place, and that she came there as a child with her family. She adds that she may have sat at that very table, and then goes on to say that when she started working there, she realized that this place was not something that she would enjoy. He tells her that in the beginning, he imagined things would be perfectly balanced, and that he even had a bet with his partner Arnold about it. He says they made 100 hopeful storylines that almost no one took them up on, and that he eventually lost the bet. He says Arnold always had a somewhat dim view of people, that he preferred the host, and that he begged them to not let you people in. The money men, Delos. He says he told him that they would be fine because Delos didn't know what they were paying for. It wasn't a business venture, not a theme park, but an entire world. As he's saying this, a host pouring wine for them gets frozen and wine starts to overflow. He goes on with the story saying they designed every inch of it, and in here they were gods. Teresa looks around and notices that all the hosts she can see are frozen in place as if time has stood still. He finishes by saying that they were merely their guests. She looks uncomfortable and lights a cigarette. She asks, and how did that work out for Arnold? He says, sadly he lost his perspective. He went mad. I haven't. As you well know, I have always seen things very clearly. She responds that this is the table I sat at with my parents. This is the chair I sat in. He smiles and says, we know everything about our guests, don't we? As we know everything about our employees. He says, I do hope you will be careful with Bernard. He has a sensitive disposition. Right then, the hosts come back online, and we see from the side view that he points his finger to make that happen. He goes on to say that there have been many of you over the years, and we've almost always found a way to make it work. So I'll ask you nicely, please don't get in my way. She gives him a look, stands up to leave, Maeve and says the board will agree with her and will be sending a representative. He says they already have and that he thought she would have already known. When the host comes back to the table to clean up the spill, Ford tells him that it won't be necessary and that he can go ahead and join the others now. At this point, we see that things are shaking and Teresa gets up to see what's going on. He says she can tell the board that his narrative will be done on time and that it won't be a retrospective, which he is sure they've all feared. We see this giant earth-moving machine cutting into the hillside, and then he finishes by telling her he isn't the sentimental type. We find William and Dolores outside Slim's hideout. He tells her that she's going to have to stay back since Slim has them outnumbered. When she tries to come along anyways, he explains that he can't be hurt in there, but she can, so he needs her to wait outside. The bounty hunter, Logan, and William enter the place guns blazing to kill all Slim's men. They're able to get their man, and it looks like they have a pretty fun time doing it. The man in black is riding with Lawrence, who tells him he thinks their plan is crazy. He indicates that the plan is to go after Wyatt with just the two of them. He tells him he isn't going to get himself killed, and as they're riding, they find Teddy tied to a tree. He asks the man in black to put him out of his misery, to which he replies that he's sorry, but it looks like misery's all you got. The scene ends with him cutting Teddy down. William's group is riding Slim back to town when Logan gets the idea to gag him. They stop and Slim pleads with him, saying that he knows they're just in it for the money. He says his boss Alazzo will pay double the bounty, and when Logan hears this, he shoots the bounty hunter on the spot. William freaks out, and Logan tells him that Alazzo is their ticket to one of the best rides in the park. That William's bullshit mission led them straight to an Easter egg. The two have a standoff where they both pull their guns on the host, and then Logan tells him that this is going to be fun. He asks him to go black hat with him. William asks what's wrong with him, as soon as they get away from the real world, he turns into an evil prick. Logan then reminds him that it's a game, and asks him if he's still trying to impress Dolores. He says he can tell him that she doesn't give a shit about how he plays the game, and she asks what they're talking about. Logan says she'll be alright with the trip down the dark side, and so will William. We then see them ride off with Logan asking Slim for directions to Pariah. At the programming center, the techs are watching Hector's gang ride into town with the guests who've joined them this time. Stubbs says let's give them something to shoot at and has the tech retask a few soldiers. The narrative starts the same way as usual. We see them start shooting up the street. When Hector comes inside for the safe, Maeve pulls her derringer on him and tells him she wants to have a talk. She takes him upstairs and offers to give him the combination to the safe in exchange for some answers. She shows him the drawing that she made and says that she wants to know what it's about. He tells her it's called a shade and that the narratives make figures out of them. He says it walks through worlds, that it was sent from hell to oversee their world. One of the texts tells Stubbs that there is a family coming from the homestead into town, so he has her jam their guns and get everything cleared up in the street. Maeve tells Hector she thought she was crazy and asks him to cut her with his knife, that she got shot and that she saw the shade standing over her and then it was like nothing happened. He doesn't want to cut into her but tells her that the Dreamwalkers say that there were some people who could see them, that it was a blessing from God to see them, to see the masters that pull your strings. She eventually stabs the knife into herself and tells him to reach inside. He finds and pulls out the shell that the tech left inside her earlier. When Hector asks what it all means, she says that it means she's not crazy and that none of this matters. As the sheriff shows up at the door, she kisses him and they eventually get shot up through the door. The episode ends there, and even though the pace was a little slower, I think we learned a lot. I'll be working on my summary video for part 2, so make sure you check back for that soon. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them all. I'm thinking about the revelation that Logan is there for business and just how much of a badass Dr. Ford is when he wants to show off. The Maeve stuff is getting real, and I'm liking the twist that some of the hosts have an idea of what's going on in the park. Of course, the Dolores stuff is interesting, and it'll be cool to see who this Alazzo character is. Not to mention, she's looking for the maze, and the Man in Black is looking for the maze at the same time. And even though they're not going in the same direction, there's a good chance that their paths may cross soon. So there'll be a lot to talk about, no doubt about that. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel so you know when the next one comes out. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.